The grid. A digital frontier. I tried to picture clusters of information as they moved through the computer. What did they look like? Ships? Motorcycles? Or the circuits like freeways? I kept dreaming of a world I thought I'd never see. And then, one day, I got in. Alright, before we get into this video, I want to make sure I send a shout out to the Blurredverse podcast because they recently invited me on one of their latest episodes, and these guys are talking about a lot of stuff in the Blurred community, a lot of things that are happening in geekdom in general, and we were talking about the Disney investor call where they announced a whole bunch of new content that's going to be coming out over the next couple of years, and it was a really fun episode to be a part of, so I just want to make sure that you do your part and show them some love because I really was flattered to be invited on. So I'll leave a link in the description for where you can find them on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and hopefully you'll check out the episode when it's available. Come, programs, let's gather round and bask in this, the 10th anniversary of a little film we like to call Tron Legacy, or Disney would like to call it that because that's what they named it. But this is the 10th anniversary of the sequel to their original film, Tron, and I just thought it'd be a good time for us to talk about it and discuss its place in cinema and pop culture, and whether or not it was just an excuse for Daft Punk to do some really dope electronic music. Now, obviously, we can't talk about Tron Legacy without briefly touching on the original Tron film from 1982, because this was back in the day when Disney was not the media juggernaut it is today. In fact, there was signs that it was actually kind of struggling, even though it was trying to do a lot of different things, a lot of stuff that was, pretty bold for Disney to be doing. Like, when you think about people who talk about Event Horizon, the whole idea of astronauts finding hell in space, and you're just thinking to yourself, I mean, the black hole did that back in the 70s, and that was definitely a big risk for Disney that didn't entirely pay off, but they were still willing to take a chance on Tron, which was very high concept for 1982, the whole idea of someone being digitized and transported into a whole world inside of a computer. That was crazy. Just thinking about it from a special effects standpoint and a visual effects standpoint, this is some pretty groundbreaking stuff that they were doing, and it was painstaking work back in those days, and it's still hard to pull off some of those types of visual effects today, but you see where the groundwork was laid with Tron, and it's definitely something that a lot of people gravitated towards over time, and eventually we got to a point where Disney said, hey, let's make a sequel to this. Yeah, it's been 28 years, but obviously there is a fan base that may want to see a follow-up to this film that people still keep referring to this day. Tron Legacy would actually focus on Sam Flynn, the son of Jeff Bridges' character, Kevin Flynn from the original film, as Sam has grown up not having his father in his life for much of it after his disappearance some 20 years ago. After receiving a message seemingly from his father, he's prompted to investigate going to his father's old arcade and inadvertently being transported to the grid, where he is forced to face off against a number of malevolent programs, in addition to the merciless dictator of the grid, Clue, who has his father's face. Now, admittedly, I didn't see the original film Tron until after I saw Tron Legacy, and you would think that you would be confused going into Tron Legacy without having seen the first film, but they really do a pretty decent job of sort of filling in the gaps for anyone who came in late, and it doesn't feel clunky or ruin the pacing of the film, at least in my opinion. But it's amazing to look at Tron Legacy now and see how, at least visually, this film still holds up masterfully, in my opinion. I think as far as Joseph Kosinski, the director's background as an architect, I feel like that's something that definitely had to have come into play as far as him relaying ideas to his production designers and his special effects people, because there's just this amalgam of ideas that's really visually arresting, and this is just the epitome of eye candy to watch play out. There's this cold, clean efficiency and these sleek lines to things like the light cycles and the costumes and the buildings and just these beams of light everywhere, and everything looks like it's supposed to be there. And you really get this sense that if this idea of the grid were real, this is how it would look. And I love how they even sort of foreshadow that while we're still in the real world being introduced to Sam during the initial boardroom scene. And it's just kind of amazing that you have that from like a storytelling standpoint to let you know this is what Sam has in store for him, you know? It's like, you know, you best start believing in NCOM boardrooms, boyo, because you're in one. That was bad. I apologize, and I'm ashamed of and for myself. We should probably move on. Now, critics were admittedly mixed as far as Tron Legacy's story and character development, but even looking back on the film and having watched it recently, I feel like the ideas that they were trying to put on display, the sort of philosophical musings that they were, you know, throwing out there, were pretty interesting, and they still kind of hold up. I think the whole idea of what you could take from the grid and bring into the real world to try and improve humanity and mankind, and then also have the flip side of it with Clue trying to escape the grid into the real world to create the quote-unquote perfect system and the dangerous implications of that. I think that that's something that definitely helped to elevate Tron Legacy above what the original film was trying to do, and just kind of looking at it from a standpoint of, you know, how was Clue corrupted and what has Flynn been doing in the grid for the past 20 or so years as a human being, and, you know, even getting a little bit granular as far as, you know, is he just programming all of his food? Does he still poop? You know, these are important things that I feel the film definitely tried to answer, even though, yes, they did not try to explain how, you know, food is for him and if he still needs to poop. But I don't know why I'm still on this subject. That's just how my mind works. And yes, the de-aging effects for Jeff Bridges were rough looking even back then, but back in 2010, can you really blame them? You know, as far as what they were trying to pull off, I think they did a pretty impressive job for the time, and you can see how from that other films have been able to do de-aging for characters, especially in the last couple of Marvel films, a lot better and a lot more convincingly. So you kind of have to start somewhere, and you know, the best special effects always have a starting point where you can look back on them in retrospect and see that they were a little rough, but that's kind of what you have to do. It's growing pains, you know, baby steps. This is what it is. I think what really helps is the fact that Bridges' performance as Clue is still kind of shining through that visual effect and really kind of pulling you in with just how villainous and vindictive he is, and just seeing where that character originally was in the first film to where he is in Tron Legacy is kind of amazing, because you just think to yourself, you know, why be monotone and robotic when you can just be a dick and have a personality? It's a great counter to the older Kevin Flynn, who's been trapped in the grid these past like 2 decades, who is been forced into exile, and it kind of sets up this great conflict between him and Sam, as Sam is trying to get him to come back into the real world with him, but Kevin Flynn realizes that there's so much more going on beyond him being reunited with his son. And I feel like the film really does a good job of articulating that and setting up these stakes, and it's just kind of amazing to see Jeff Bridges returning to this character and playing him a lot differently. It's almost kind of like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and I know that's, might be sacrilege to some people to bring up that film, but I thought it was a great point where Star Wars could have actually been something different than what it kind of still is to this point, and that's another story for another day. To say nothing of Olivia Wilde's character, Cora, whose very existence is something that actually plays very heavily into the whole idea of a program being outside of the grid and what that could mean for humanity in general. And I kind of feel like this is one of her best performances, just from the level of innocence and vulnerability she infuses the character with, but there's still that fearlessness and sort of warrior spirit to her that makes her a really cool character to see in a lot of different scenes in this film, especially when she's introduced. Say what you will about the film, but I definitely feel like it's one of those cases where a sequel is legitimately trying to elevate the concepts from the original film and take the story in a new direction that really sets it apart and serves as a great continuation to the story. And it's amazing that we even got the animated series Tron Uprising, which is just one of the most brilliant animated series, I think, that Disney has definitely produced, and one that definitely shows what you can do with animation, at least here in North America, and it's a shame that it only lasted one season. This was Disney's rationale. How do we merchandise this series? Like, what's the point of even making it if we can't sell toys off of it? We're making a dozen Star Wars and a dozen Marvel shows. Why would we want to put effort into bringing back one of our original concepts that we developed in-house? Like, what's the point of that? You lack vision and imagination, Disney. That's what that's about. But let's be real. Most of us went into Tron Legacy expecting one thing above all else: to watch the greatest Daft Punk visual album of all time. I'll argue with any critic who found the themes, characters, and overall story of Tron Legacy to be lacking, but I'm not going to sit up here and act like the thing I wasn't the most interested about this film, besides the visuals, was the fact that Daft Punk was going to be working on the score of the film. And make no mistake, Tron Legacy would not be Tron Legacy without the music of Daft Punk. The original Tron was certainly praised for its own musical score, courtesy of synth pioneer Wendy Carlos, so it makes perfect sense that Tron Legacy would bring in Daft Punk to provide music for the film. The blend of electronic music and orchestral arrangement was silky smooth and butter soft. This was an amazing score that just worked to sort of build tension and create emotion. And this is kind of perfect as an example when you think about Adagio for Tron, where they said, yo, we're gonna have a flashback scene in this film where you find out what happened to Tron and it's sad as fuck. And Daft Punk said, oh, okay, we're gonna make Adagio for our fallen brother. This is gonna be very down-tempo and melodic, and it's gonna be great, and it's going to be sad, and you're going to just feel the emotions when you realize that Tron has been defeated and struck down in this coup from Clue. Yes, I meant for that to rhyme, and I apologize for nothing. They even said, hey, we're going to give you a cameo in the film for the scene that takes place in a club run by the actor who couldn't stop playing Tony Blair for like a 5-year period. It's riffing on David Bowie, and that's going to transition into an action scene. Daft Punk said, oh, say no more. We've got End of Line, Caster, Derezed. It's going to be awesome. Someone even had the vision and imagination to say, hey, let's get Olivia Wilde to even be in the music video for Derezzed, and Daft Punk was like,
"You son of a bitch."
Now, I usually don't make a big deal about Oscar snubs, but this was one that I have to say legitimately boiled my piss, if you will pardon my French. Because if you're going to sit here and tell me that you can give Oscars to people like Eminem and 3 6 Mafia, who rightly deserved their Oscars when they got them, and then tell me that Daft Punk didn't even deserve a nomination that year? Nah. Now, I like Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor when they compose music, but if you're gonna really sit there and tell me that they deserve their Oscar for their score to The Social Network over Tron Legacy's score, I will personally buy a ticket to anywhere in the continental United States that you are and personally slap you in the mouth. Hey guys, thanks for watching as always. If you've got your own thoughts or opinions on Tron Legacy that you would like to share, go ahead and leave a comment in the section below. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the notification bell, share this video with your friends and family, and if you'd like to keep up to date on more At Random videos, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button right over here.